The antiseptic smell hit me before I even opened my eyes. It was sharp and cold, the kind of clean that doesn't feel clean at all. It feels like erasure. My eyelids were heavy. My mouth tasted like copper and dried salt. And the sound, that steady mechanical beeping, told me I was somewhere I had never wanted to be. I turned my head slowly. White ceiling. White curtain. A thin blanket, the color of old dishwater, pulled up to my chest. I was alive. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. The last thing I remembered clearly was the kitchen floor. The way the tile felt cold against my cheek when my legs gave out. I had been reaching for the counter and then there was nothing. Just black and the distant sound of my own breathing getting slower and slower. My husband. I'll call him my husband, because that's what he was, legally, on paper, in the eyes of everyone who came to our wedding and ate our food and cried at my vows. He had been standing right there. He'd seen me fall. I know he saw me because I heard him say my name. Once. Just once. And then I heard the door. A nurse came in not long after I woke up. Young, tired eyes, moving with the efficiency of someone who had done this shift too many times. She checked my chart, adjusted something on the IV stand, and gave me the kind of smile that is really just a professional courtesy. "You're at Meridian Private Medical Center," she said before I could ask. "You were brought in 2 nights ago. Severe systemic inflammation, possible organ involvement. The doctor stabilized you overnight." 2 nights. I had been here 2 nights. "My husband," I said. My voice came out like gravel. He was here when you were admitted," she said carefully. "He filled out your intake forms." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The way she looked at the clipboard instead of at me told me everything. He had been here. He had done the paperwork. And then he had left. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my kidneys or my liver or whatever else had decided to stop working properly. "My name is Imogen. I'm 31 years old. I teach elementary school art in the same district I grew up in, which has always felt like either a gift or a failure depending on the day. I met my husband when I was 26. He was charming in the way that only makes sense in retrospect, the kind of charm that is really just careful attention, and careful attention can look like love for a very long time if you want it to badly enough. We got married at 28. My mother cried. His mother shook my hand. By the time I ended up on that hospital floor, I had spent 3 years slowly learning how to make myself smaller, how to apologize for things that weren't my fault, how to read the temperature of a room the moment I walked in so I could adjust myself accordingly, how to want less, take less, need less. I had been sick for months before I collapsed. Low energy, joint pain, episodes of nausea that I kept chalking up to stress. My husband told me I was probably just anxious. His mother told me I was probably just dramatic. I made an appointment with my primary care doctor and then canceled it twice because I felt guilty taking a half day from work. I almost didn't go to the hospital the night I fell. Even on the floor, even with the room going dark at the edges, some part of me thought, maybe I'm overreacting. That part of me, I now understand, had been trained very carefully. On the 3rd morning, a man in a suit came to my room. That's the only way I can describe him at first, a man in a suit, because everything else about him took longer to process. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of posture that comes from decades of standing in rooms where people were watching. He stood in the doorway for a moment before he knocked on the open door. "Ms. Imogen?" he said. Not a question exactly. More like he was confirming something he already knew. "Yes," I said. He stepped inside and sat down in the chair beside my bed, slowly, like his knees hurt but he wasn't going to mention it. He was holding a folder. He set it on his knee without opening it. "My name is Roland," he said it on his knee without opening it. "My name is Roland," he said. "I apologize for coming unannounced. I've been looking for a way to speak with you for some time." I looked at him. He didn't look dangerous. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'm sorry," I said. "Do I know you?" He looked at me for a long moment and something moved across his face. Grief, maybe, or the older cousin of grief, the kind that has already passed through all its stages and come out the other side as something quieter and more permanent. "No," he said, "but I know you. Or, I knew your mother. Your birth mother." The beeping continued. Someone in the hallway laughed at something. A cart wheeled past the door. I said, "I think you have the wrong person." "Your birthday is March 14th, he said. "You were born at St. Augustine's Hospital in Claremont. You have a small crescent-shaped scar on your left shoulder blade from a fall when you were about 18 months old." He paused. "You were adopted at age 2 by the Harwell family. Your adoptive parents named you Imogen after your mother's grandmother." I stared at him. "I have been searching for you," he said quietly, "for 29 years. Here is what I want you to understand about that moment. I did not feel wonder. I did not feel the kind of cinematic revelation that rearranges everything instantly into something beautiful. What I felt was a low, vertiginous sensation, like the floor had moved 6 inches to the left and I was still catching up. "My parents never told me much about my birth family," I said slowly. "They said the records were sealed." "They were," Roland said. "By request, but not your birth mother's request." He opened the folder then, finally, and laid a document on the blanket beside my hand. "Your birth mother, my sister, spent years trying to find you after she was forced to give you up. She passed away 4 years ago, but before she died, she asked me to keep looking," his sister, "which made him, 'You're my uncle,'" I said. He nodded once, and I watched him press his lips together the way people do when they are trying very hard not to let their face do something they can't take back in a room with a near stranger. "Your mother's name was Helena," he said. "She was 34 years old, a single mother running a small architectural firm she built from nothing. When you were born, she was in a situation she couldn't control. Your father's family had significant resources and significant lawyers. They took you. She never forgave herself." I looked at the document. It was a birth record. It had my name on it, not Imogen Harwell, but Imogen Voss. Voss. "Our family has a foundation," Roland said carefully. "Your mother started it. She left it to me when she died, with instructions." He paused. "With instructions to find you and ensure that her share passed to you. Her rightful heir. I need to tell you about the bills now, because that's what started all of this unraveling. On the 4th day, a hospital administrator came to my room with a face that was apologetic in a specifically distant way. That means someone has been trained to deliver bad news without absorbing it themselves. She explained that my insurance had been flagged, that the primary policyholder, my husband, had called to make changes to our plan 3 weeks ago, that I was now listed as a secondary dependent with a very high deductible, that the balance from my current stay was substantial. "How substantial?" I asked. She told me. I lay there after she left, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought about the fact that 3 weeks ago my husband had changed our insurance plan. 3 weeks ago I had already been sick, undiagnosed, getting worse, but sick. 3 weeks ago he had done this quietly without telling me, while I was still walking around our house making dinner and grading papers and trying not to be too much of a burden. A pattern began to form in my mind. A shape I didn't want to look at directly. Roland came back that afternoon. When I told him about the insurance, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "I'll take care of it." "You can't just, 'I'll take care of it,'" he said again. Not arrogant, just certain. "Please, let me do this one thing." While I recovered, Roland visited every day. He brought real food, not flowers, which I appreciated. He brought soup from a Vietnamese place 2 blocks from the hospital and sat beside me while I ate it and told me about my mother. Helena Voss had been brilliant and stubborn and entirely unwilling to do anything the conventional way. She had started her architectural firm at 27, with 1 client and a drafting table in her apartment. By the time she was 40, she had designed 3 buildings in the city that I had walked past my entire life without knowing they were hers. She had never remarried after my father's family forced her out of my life. She had dedicated herself to her work and to looking for me and, Roland said, to a very specific and detailed type of fury that she had channeled into philanthropy with impressive results. "She would have liked you," Roland said one afternoon. "She was the kind of person who noticed things, who paid attention." "People keep telling me I notice too much," I said. He smiled. "That's what people say when they feel noticed in ways they'd rather not be." Meanwhile, I was doing my own noticing. The hospital had run extensive tests when I was admitted. My primary physician, a careful, precise woman named Dr. Osei, came to see me on the 5th day with results that had taken that long because she had wanted to be certain before she spoke. The inflammation we found in your system," she said, sitting across from me with my chart open in her lap, "is not consistent with an autoimmune condition or a hereditary disease." She paused. "It is consistent with prolonged low-level exposure to a class of compounds that are hepatotoxic, harmful to the liver and kidneys when accumulated over time." I looked at her. "We found traces of a compound called pyrrolizidine alkaloid," she said. "It occurs naturally in certain plants. In small, regular doses over an extended period, it produces exactly the symptoms you've been experiencing: fatigue, joint pain, nausea, progressive organ involvement." "How would someone be exposed to something like that?" I asked, though my voice sounded strange and far away to me, like someone else was speaking. "Typically through food or drink," she said. "Over a period of months. The supplements my husband had started buying for me last spring. The ones he'd set beside my coffee every morning. He'd been so attentive about it, so unusually attentive, and I had been so grateful because it felt like he was trying. I had taken them every day for 6 months. I told Dr. Ose. She made a note. She told me she would be making some calls. The shape I hadn't wanted to look at directly came into full focus then, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The changed insurance plan. The supplements. The way he had seen me fall and then left. The way he had spent the last year gradually moving money around in our joint accounts in ways I hadn't fully registered because I trusted him. The small business he'd started with his college friend, a business I had recently learned required a significant amount of startup capital he didn't have on his own. I had a good salary, but it wasn't that good. Where had he been planning to get that money? Roland, when I told him, sat very still. He was not the kind of man who expressed anger loudly. He expressed it the way cold water expresses cold, simply by being what it was, permeating everything around it. "I need you to rest," he said, "and I need you to let me handle a few things." "What kind of things?" "The kind," he said, "that require a different kind of lawyer than the ones you've dealt with before." I was in the hospital for 3 weeks total. The doctors wanted to be careful. The compound had to clear my system slowly and my liver needed monitoring. I slept a lot. I read. Roland brought me books, architecture books, mostly his sister's favorites. I ran my fingers over the photographs of buildings and thought about a woman I had never met, who had made beautiful things and looked for me her whole life. On the day I was discharged, Roland was waiting with a car. He took me to a furnished apartment, clean, quiet, more space than I'd ever had, in a part of the city I'd always liked but never been able to afford. "Whose is this?" I asked. "Yours," he said. "Your mother left it. It was one of the things she set aside specifically for you when you were found." I stood in the living room and looked at the afternoon light coming through the windows, and I let myself cry, finally, the way I hadn't been able to in the hospital. Not out of sadness exactly, out of something that didn't have a clean name. The feeling of being set down after carrying something very heavy for a very long time. Over the following weeks, I learned the shape of what my husband had been planning. Roland's lawyers were meticulous. They worked with Dr. Pernd, OC's documentation, and with a financial forensics specialist who spent 3 days going through 5 years of our joint accounts. What they found was not subtle when you looked at it directly. It had only been invisible to me because I had been taught, very gradually, not to look directly at things that involved my own life. He had been systematically moving money for 18 months. Not large amounts at once, small ones, irregular, the kind that don't trigger automatic alerts. He had changed the insurance plan, knowing I was sick, knowing a hospital stay was likely, knowing the bill would be impossible without it. The supplements. He had been careful, but not careful enough. The receipts existed, the timing existed. He had also, Roland's lawyers discovered, been in contact with my husband's mother throughout, a woman I had always sensed did not think I was the right kind of person for her son, though she had always been polite about it in the way that is actually its own form of cruelty. I asked Roland once, in a low moment, why? Why go to all that trouble when he could have just asked for a divorce? Roland was quiet for a moment. "A divorce attorney," he said carefully, "would have required him to divide your marital assets equally. He was planning a different kind of division. He meant that my husband had been waiting for me to die." I sat with that for a long time. The foundation that my mother had built was called the Voss Foundation for Architectural Education. It funded young designers from low-income backgrounds through school and into their first professional years. It was not a giant institution. It was careful and specific and very much shaped by the woman who had created it, whose instinct was always to build things that lasted rather than things that were immediately impressive. I was now, according to the documents Roland laid out for me across the dining room table of the apartment I was learning to think of as mine, a significant stakeholder. Not a figurehead. A genuine decision-maker, if I chose to be. "I don't know anything about running a foundation," I said. "Your mother didn't either at first," Roland said. "She learned. You will too." I looked at the documents. I thought about my students, the ones who came to art class with no supplies because their families couldn't afford them, who lit up when I put a pencil in their hand and told them the page was theirs. I thought about what it might mean to have resources behind that impulse instead of just goodwill. "Okay," I said. "Where do we start?" My husband, it turned out, did not go quietly. He had apparently assumed that because I was sick and alone and had always been careful not to make scenes, I would continue in that tradition regardless of what he had done. He was wrong about me. It took me a while to understand that too, how wrong he had always been about what I was actually made of. But I was beginning to figure it out. His lawyers contacted Roland's lawyers. There were letters. There were counterclaims that were, as Roland described them with barely concealed contempt, creative. His mother left a voicemail on my old cell phone, the one I had stopped using, that I only listened to once, which was enough. We had been scheduled to attend a fundraising dinner for a local preservation society in early spring. My husband and I had bought tickets together 8 months ago before any of this. I still had the ticket. I decided to go. Roland offered to come with me. I said yes. I wore a dress I had bought with the first month's stipend from the foundation. Dark green, understated. The kind of thing I had always wanted to wear but talked myself out of because it felt like too much. I did not feel like too much that night. I felt exactly the right size. My husband was there. He saw me from across the room, and I watched the sequence of things move across his face. Surprise first, then calculation, then the beginning of the smile he always used when he was managing a situation. He didn't get a chance to use it. The evening's program included a brief acknowledgement of the Voss Foundation's latest grant recipients. Roland had arranged it weeks earlier, quietly, through the organization's board. When the presenter read my name as the foundation's new director, the room applauded. My husband's smile stopped working. Afterward, one of the board members, a woman who had known my mother, came to find me. She held both my hands and looked at me with the particular intensity of someone seeing a resemblance they had not expected. "Helena would be so proud," she said. "She used to say she'd know you anywhere. She said some things are just in the bone." I thanked her. I didn't trust my voice to do much more than that. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I left the hospital. The criminal investigation, yes, there was one. Dr. Potter, OC's documentation had been thorough and so had Roland's lawyers, was ongoing, which I was told could take another year or more. I tried not to organize my healing around the outcome of that process. Justice, I was learning, is real, but it is not punctual, and waiting for it to arrive before you start living again is its own kind of trap. What I organized my healing around instead was simpler and more immediate. I went back to teaching. My students made a card for me when I returned. 37 construction paper panels taped together in a chain, each one decorated by a different child, each one entirely different from the one before it. I taped it to the wall above my desk, and I looked at it every morning when I came in. I had lunch with Roland every week. We talked about Helena. I was still learning her, still turning her over in my mind the way you turn over a stone to see what's underneath. Sometimes it was beautiful. Sometimes it was hard. Always it felt necessary. I moved into the apartment properly. I bought plants. 2 of them died quickly, which I took philosophically. A third one, a stubborn little succulent on the windowsill, survived everything. There's a building in the garment district that my mother designed when she was 38. I didn't know it was hers until Roland showed me a photograph, and then I stood on the sidewalk in front of it for a long time just looking. It's not flashy. It's not the kind of building that people stop to photograph. What it is extraordinarily well considered. The proportions are right, the materials age well. The light at certain times of day hits the facade in a way that makes the brick look warm. It looks like something that was built to stay. I went back to stand in front of it a few weeks later, and then a few weeks after that. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe just proximity. Maybe just the particular comfort of being near something your people made. My mother had spent her life building things that lasted. she had spent her life looking for me. I am 31 years old. I am still learning what I am made of. But I am beginning to understand that I was always more than what I'd been allowed to be, and that understanding, however late it arrived, is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything. I used to think that the hardest thing about being betrayed by someone you loved was the betrayal itself, the moment you find out. The specific, physical sensation of realizing that the version of your life you believed in was never quite real. But I was wrong about that. The hardest part isn't the discovery. The hardest part is reckoning with how long you already knew and didn't let yourself know, because knowing would have required you to act, and acting would have required a kind of courage you hadn't yet found in yourself. I think about Roland sitting in that chair beside my hospital bed, holding a folder with my real name on it. And I think about the fact that my mother, Helena, a woman I never got to meet, spent her entire adult life building something in case I was ever found. She didn't know if I was alive. She didn't know where I was, what I looked like, whether I was okay. She just kept building anyway. She kept the door open even when she had no evidence there was anyone on the other side of it. That is not luck. That is a choice, made over and over again, in the absence of any guarantee. My husband made choices too. Every morning he set those supplements beside my coffee. He made a choice. Every time he moved money quietly out of accounts I trusted him to manage honestly, he made a choice. He was counting on the same thing he had always counted on, that I would be too careful, too considerate, too conditioned to cause a scene to ever look directly at what he was doing. He understood, correctly, that I had been trained to doubt myself. What he miscalculated was that training isn't permanent. People learn new things. People change. I changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It happened the way most real changes happen. Slowly, then in a rush, then slowly again. It happened in the silences between Roland's visits when I lay in that hospital bed and started, for the first time in years, to take my own perceptions seriously. To trust the pattern I was seeing even when part of me wanted badly to find an innocent explanation. What I understand now that I didn't understand then is that intelligence isn't just about knowing facts or solving problems. It's about being willing to see what's actually in front of you, even when it's inconvenient. Even when it asks something difficult of you. My mother was intelligent in exactly that way. She saw clearly what had been done to her, and she didn't spend her life softening it into something more comfortable. She just built. She channeled it into something that would last. The ethical life, the one I'm still learning to live, isn't about being perfect or always knowing the right thing. It's about accountability to yourself first. It's about refusing to participate in your own diminishment. My husband relied on my willingness to make myself small. Roland and Helena had left me an inheritance that was the exact opposite of that, not just money or property, but evidence in brick and mortar and foundation documents, that the women in my bloodline knew how to take up space. I am learning to take up space. I am learning to take up space. I am learning that what survived the worst period of my life wasn't resilience in the dramatic sense. It wasn't strength or toughness or any of the words people use when they want suffering to sound empowering. What survived was something quieter. Curiosity, the part of me that kept asking questions even when the answers were frightening. The part that stood on a sidewalk in the garment district and looked at a building my mother designed and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I had somewhere to be. That is enough to build a life on, I know, because I watched someone else do it.